New data from Europe's leading climate agency shows that 2025 was the third hottest year on record and just 0.13 degrees away from taking the top spot. The Copernicus Annual Global Climate Summary also shows the Earth's average temperature over the past 3 years has risen above 1.5 degrees of global warming. That's a threshold scientists warn dramatically increases the risk of extreme weather and human harm. We're here to talk us through potential implications for Australia is Nicki Hutley, who's a climate councillor and economist. Nicki, good to see you.
Thanks, Ross.
So what were temperatures like in Australia last year?
So we had the fourth hottest year on record, but before anyone thinks that that's something to be glad about, over the last 12 years, we've had 9 of the 10 hottest years on record, clearly showing a rising trend and an alarming trend that is also seeing increasing numbers of natural disasters.
Well, that was my next question. What impact are those temperatures having on climate and natural disasters? Of course, this year has begun with flooding and fires.
Yeah, look, we're just seeing this. I mean, Australians, you barely can sort of blink and get over one disaster and we're on to the next one. Last year was a particularly bad year for floods. This year, as you said, we've already started off with fires as well as floods at the same time in different parts of the country. But it's not just these extreme events, which are the ones that tend to grab the headlines and cause the biggest losses. Of course, we also have more extreme heat days, that's over 32 degrees, and those affect people's health, they affect your ability to work, they affect agricultural production. So we're seeing those things like coastal inundation, rising sea levels, all of these things, coastal erosion. There are these chronic events as well as the very extreme natural disasters or unnatural disasters, as we now call them, because they are climate fueled on top of everything else.
And what have been the cost to the economy, Nicki, of extreme weather over 2025?
So in 2025, we saw insured losses of around $2 billion. That's one of the most expensive years, but not the most expensive years on record. That's just insured losses. We know that many homes and some businesses are not insured or not adequately insured. And of course, it doesn't take into account the billions of dollars that governments, both state and federal, spend on recovery spending. We've just had an announcement, of course, from the South Australian government of $52,000 each for remediation, from the Victorian government. For uninsured houses, there are a lot of additional costs in terms of extra pressure on the health system, businesses losing productivity. So there are many that are unmeasured. We know that in the first quarter of last year, GDP was around 0.1 to 0.2 percentage points lower. Doesn't sound like a huge amount, but we're talking about a $1.5 trillion economy. So this is, hundreds of millions of dollars we're talking about in lost economic opportunity. And that's just what we can capture.
So how do those costs tally with investment and potential investment to combat climate change?
Yeah, look, the economics of climate action have changed dramatically over the last 15 years. We know that renewables are cheaper, even when backed by firming and storage. We know they're cheaper than fossil fuels. And that's even before you count for the climate costs. When you add in those climate costs, they're dramatically lower. We need to be taking account of that every time we approve a new mine. We need to be saying, what is the impact that this is going to have on the broader economy? We absolutely must look at the economics, which is clearly showing that inaction is now more expensive than action towards net zero. Certainly in the energy sector, we're seeing that start to reach tipping points in the transport sector. It will take more support and a little bit of help in some other industries. That's why we have things like the safeguard mechanism that are helping us to get towards where we need to be in those industrial sectors. But we clearly need to be really acting, particularly on reducing fossil fuel usage as fast as we can.
And how concerned should we be that average world temperatures have been above 1.5 degrees for the last 3 years? This is above this threshold that's been set as the line that can't be crossed.
Well, that's right. And, what we're really worried about, as bad as things might seem now, when you look at all the headlines, not only in Australia, about the world, of these really severe weather events that are being driven, much more violently and frequently by climate change, by those fossil fuel burnings, we are only going to see this, unfortunately, get worse. We must act as quickly as we can, both in Australia, where we have the means to do so, cheap and abundant solar energy, but right around the world. And the good news is, for the first time ever, we saw both India and China's emissions actually dropped in 2025. That's just come out, that data. So even without the US, we are starting to see action from the two of the three largest or four largest economies in the world, and that's absolutely critically important.